So this right here is the brand new Afterburner, a collaboration between iFlight and 2 Raw Aerials that brings quite literally one of the highest performing 5-inch FPV drones to the market. Let's get a look.
I make it go.
So if you're new to the channel, my name is Ben and I'm a cinematic FPV drone pilot based here in the UK. And for the past month, I've been putting the Afterburner to the test to find out exactly how it performs in a number of typical cinematic FPV environments. For those of you who don't know, I'm a full-time commercial drone pilot, flying drones in a range of sizes, but specialising particularly in FPV. And so when the guys at 2 Raw asked me if I wanted to test the Afterburner and push it to its limits, I said absolutely. So here's what we got up to. So during my month of testing with the Afterburner, we took it to a series of typical cinematic FPV locations, coastal spots, valleys, forests and other cinematic locations, along with a day of filming motocross riders, doing high-speed chasing and fast flips and manoeuvres to really get a feel for how this quad performed when it was pushed to its limits. So for our first flight with the Afterburner, we took it down to a local coastal spot by the name of Ballintoy Harbour, situated along Northern Ireland's Causeway Coast. This is a spot I visit regularly for FPV flying, and it's great for FPV because there's lots of rock formations situated along the coastline, which often have waves splashing up against them, which makes for great FPV shots when you fly right and close to the water. However, being by the coast, this spot often is quite windy, and when we got down there on our first day, we were met with some quite strong winds. The wind is much worse than I thought it was going to be. It's upwards of 15 knots, which typically would be far too strong for my 5 inches to fly through relatively smoothly. Normally in situations like this, I'd be pulling out my 7 inch, as the bigger props and larger motors give me much more handling when it comes to being able to fight and cut through these winds. And so initially I was actually a bit cautious about putting up the Afterburner for its first flight here, as it quite easily could have ended up in the water with the strong winds and gusts. However, this is where I was absolutely blown away, as when I put the quad up and started to go for shots, it was almost as if there was no wind at all. The Afterburner was literally able to cut through the wind. And I was remarkably impressed with this, because if I put up my Apex, there was absolutely no way I was going to be able to fly through those winds. If you've ever been trying to get a shot in strong winds before, you probably know what it's like when you're basically flying at a side angle, trying to keep your quad level whilst going for a line. It's a bit of a pain and it often ruins your shot if you're not able to keep the quad level. However, when I put up the Afterburner, it literally cut right through the wind, and it was almost as if there was no wind there at all. I honestly cannot put into words how well this drone flies, particularly in strong wind conditions. If anything, the quad had similar performance to my 7 inches when it came to the wind. And this was quite interesting, as the Afterburner has more of a comparable footprint to a 4-inch quad than it does a typical 5-inch, never mind a 7-inch. So in theory, with a smaller mass, it should be more susceptible to stronger winds. However, this was not the case when we were flying it. Again, when I had it up, it was cutting through the winds with absolutely no problems at all. So this was a huge upside to the Afterburner that we discovered very early on. It's a remarkably powerful quad, as well as being very aerodynamic, and this is largely down to the very unique frame design and the protective aero shell that goes over the top part of the frame, and we'll touch on that later in the video. We took the quad to another famous cliffline beach along the north coast, which actually has a big temple that sits right on the edge of the coastline. Again, when we got down here, it was very windy, and so the quad was put to the test yet again. Mark, who did all the chase flying in the past couple of weeks, was flying a SpeedyV Master 5, and he was struggling behind me to get a usable shot at this spot, as the wind was really pushing and affecting the flight performance of his quad, compared to the Afterburner, which was literally just cutting right through the wind as if there was none there. I'm at 30% throttle right now, flying into the wind on a super windy day at the coast on a 5-inch. And like, you gotta remember everyone, this drone is like the size of a 4-inch. It pretty much has the same footprint as a 4-inch. Obviously you're spinning a 5-inch prop on 2207s. The form factor here, you'd think it would struggle more in the wind, but it just has so much power. And I'm able to cut through the wind here, absolutely no problem at all. We again got a lot of nice wave surfing shots on this beach, flying as low as we could to the water, trying to go nice and fast and get some really nice dynamic shots flying as the waves were crashing right past us, and the drone flew absolutely beautifully here. The footage came out really well. The next day we moved on to some forest locations where we did a lot of forest surfing shots, flying right in between the trees, diving down to little rivers, did a lot of typical cinematic 5-inch cruising shots, and again the quad performed really well here. An incredible thing I noticed with this drone was when I was actually reviewing my GoPro footage after filming with it, the footage was unbelievably stable for being non-stabilized. At times I was looking through the files going, have I actually ran this through GyroFlow already? Because the raw footage was actually so smooth that if I had any issues with GyroFlow and say the gyro data not recording in the GoPro footage, I probably wouldn't need to worry too much in terms of the stability of the footage. And again, I can't say I've experienced this with any of my other quads. Pretty much all my quads, bar my Cinewhoops, need post-stabilization to the footage in order to get a smooth result. However, with the Afterburner, you can quite literally get stabilized looking footage out of camera. Of course, if you're doing really hard flips and maneuvers, they are going to show up in the footage. But for the most part, I was extremely impressed in terms of how smooth the footage was before any stabilization had been applied. And I think that's testimony to how well built and tuned this quad really is. If you don't know, the two main guys who make up Two Raw Aerials is legendary pilot Ellis Van Jason, who you've probably seen on YouTube for his incredible cinematic FPV videos, flying in the most stunning locations and getting some of the most incredible looking shots. The second member of the team, Josh, is a well-known drone designer and builder, and he specialises particularly in building larger cine lifters, focused on capturing shots with high-end cinema cameras, including Red Komodos, the Freefly Ember, and Sony FX6. So the Afterburner has quite literally some of the biggest names in professional drone design and cinematic FPV behind it. This quad is built and tuned to near perfection in terms of enabling you to capture high-end cinematic shots. We had the quad around a load of coastal spots for a lot of typical cruising shots, but we wanted to find out how the quad would perform in a number of high-speed filming environments, particularly with vehicles. So first up, we took the quad down to a local motocross track to do some chase filming. Right, so we're up here at a motocross track doing some FPV filming with the brand new iFlight Afterburner. This right here is the perfect place for the Afterburner. The Afterburner is absolutely perfect for environments like this here, where we're chasing fast moving vehicles and getting really close to the action whilst capturing cinematic footage. We're filming on the GoPro 12. We're going to be doing a load of filming in different camera settings, getting some nice 4K 120 slow-mo shots. And we're going to be absolutely full sending the Afterburner today, showcasing what it can really do as a high-speed cinematic 5-inch. Let's go. He hit me. Oh my god. I just flew him into a bike. That was incredible. So this is the aftermath of the crash. As you can see, we've got a bit of sand in our motors, which is understandable as we just crashed in basically a big sand pit. But if you're wondering about the durability of the quad, as you can see here, there's literally not a scratch on any of the arms. Arms are still rock solid, the frame's still rock solid. I have not cracked it in any way, shape or form. So if anyone's wondering about the durability of these truss structure arms, don't have any concerns. I have literally just been catapulted out of the air by a motorbike. And this guy has held up no problem. There is literally not a scratch on the drone. So that wraps up our motocross filming. Let's head to the next one. Another feature of the Afterburner which we found was very impressive was actually how efficient the drone was. Boosted by 5 inches, particularly my daily driver, which is my ImpulseRC ApexDC, it will only normally fly for about 5 minutes max with a full-size GoPro and a 1500 mAh 6S pack. However, with the Afterburner, we were getting flight times as long as 9 minutes, and it was flying on average for 7 to 8 minutes with the full-size GoPro 12, which is remarkably efficient for a 5-inch quad. And it's worth noting that those were not slow flights. Funny, the longest flight we actually got out of the Afterburner was when we were chasing the motorbikes at high speed. So if that is not testimony to how efficient this quad is, I don't really know what is. So an interesting thing about me is I actually rarely fly 5 inches. Particularly in my country, most of the landscape I have available to me is more sort of 7-inch territory. And I rarely pull out a 5-inch for the main reason that they just don't fly long enough for the environments that I fly in. If I'm flying down by the coast or down in valleys, I almost always pull out my 7-inch quads, as I want to get that longer flight time than your typical 5 minutes on a 5-inch. However, for me, the Afterburner has changed this, and I'll be pulling this guy out a lot more than I will the 7-inch. So as you've seen, it's so much smaller, so even when I'm out hiking to spots and I'm bringing my quads with me, bringing that guy is much easier than bringing a 7-inch quad. And so overall, without a doubt, I can say this is easily one of the best 5 inches I've flown. So So first of all, what actually makes the Afterburner better than your typical 5-inch? Well, the Afterburner has a number of key features that set it apart from typical 5-inch FPV drone frames and bind and flies. So probably one of the most noticeable features about the quad, as you can see here, is its very unique design. The quad adopts a truss arm structure and has a much smaller overall footprint compared to a typical 5-inch frame. The Afterburner is actually very similar to a 4-inch frame when you compare it size-wise. However, it's still able to retain the power and performance of a 5-inch frame with 2207 1850 kV motors and 5-inch props. Another unique feature of the Afterburner is its protective shell that actually goes over the top part of the quad, as this is great as it's very good at protecting the stack from water ingress, dust, dirt, anything could potentially get onto the stack and potentially cause a short. And the DJI O3 camera is also situated within the shell, providing it with a bit more protection. It is also TPU mounted, as you see here, so you'll have no issues with jello in your FPV feed. The action camera, as you can see here, is mounted up at the front of the quad in a specially designed CNC metal camera mount. The majority of FPV frames out there will ship with typical TPU printed camera mounts, which are okay for the most part, but you can have issues with them ripping in a hard crash or just wearing over time. In terms of the quad's parts, it's using the iFlight Zing 2 2207 1750 kV motors. The pre-production model I'm using has the iFlight Blitz F7 20x20 stack, which has the F7 flight controller and the 55 amp ESC. In terms of the video transmission, the quad comes as standard with the DJI O3 transmission, which is arguably one of the best video transmission systems on the market for cinematic FPV. And as standard, the quad comes with an iFlight Blitz M10 GPS module, allowing for very quick sat locks. In terms of battery mounting, as you can see, this is a bottom mounted frame, meaning you strap your lipos onto the bottom end of the quad, and depending on what size of pack you use, you can either strap them horizontally or vertically. And last but not least, in terms of receiver systems, the quad comes with either TBS Crossfire or Express LRS. So another thing I found really impressive with the Afterburner was actually its flight time. Typically when you ask somebody about the flight time of a drone, it's kind of like asking how long is a piece of string. There are so many different factors that's going to determine the flight time of a quad. Number one being how hard you actually fly the drone. If you're doing slow cruising where you're pulling very little amps in the battery, then you're obviously going to be able to fly much longer than if you flew the same battery but much faster. Compared to the likes of DJI Mavics that are speed limited and are only really affected by the likes of wind, FPV drones have so much more factors that come into play when it comes to determining flight time. However, we took the liberty of going ahead and basically testing every possible LiPo size in order to determine what is the optimum pack size for getting the most flight time and performance out of the Afterburner. In terms of the 6S LiPos we used, we had the China Hobbyline 1300 milliamp, the 1500 milliamp, I had the G&B 1550, G&B 1850, and last but not least, the Dogcom 2200 milliamp 6S. And we came to the conclusion that the best pack for flight time and performance was either the G&B 1550 or the China Hobbyline 1500. This on average was giving us flight times of between 6 to 8 minutes, and that's landing at around 3.6 volts. And you have to remember, these were not cruising flights. We were chasing MX bikes at speed, doing flips, rolls, all sorts of maneuvers, basically flying the way you typically would with a 5-inch quad. And that is another amazing feature of the Afterburner. Not only can it perform, but it is also remarkably efficient. So whilst this is a very impressive quad, there are a few drawbacks to the drone, as there is with every product release. One of which may be if you're interested in getting footage from the DJI O3 camera. Unfortunately, due to the design of the frame, you're going to have the props in view in the O3 feed. So if you're trying to get footage from the O3, it's obviously not going to work because you're going to have the props in view of the frame. But this drone is targeted towards cinematic pilots. So if you're mounting an external action camera anyway, and you're not worried about getting footage in the O3, then of course this is not going to be an issue for you. You still of course get the benefits of the O3's video transmission, which is far superior to any other competing system out there at the minute. So in that regard, it'll only be an issue if you're wanting to get footage specifically from the O3 camera. Another slight issue we came across with this quad was the bottom mounted battery was a bit of a pain when we were out in the field and we were trying to take off. The quad kept falling over as unless you mounted your battery perfectly and the center of gravity was perfect, it kind of kept leaning to either side. But however, this comes down to what brand of LiPos you're actually using. I was using the China Hobbyline 1500 milliamp 6S packs here. As you can see, they're rather long, so they weren't able to be mounted horizontally anyway, which would give me a bit more surface area to be able to mount the quad more level. So this may not be an issue for you if you're using a slightly larger pack in terms of width. It just was a bit of an issue for us as our packs were slightly longer and more thin, meaning that it was a bit harder to balance the quad when we were going to take off. So during the month I've had the Afterburner here for filming and testing, I also gave it to a number of other cinematic pilots to see what their thoughts were on it.
Hello, my name is Mark Gray. I was the chase pilot for the iFlight Afterburner promotional video. I filmed all the chase footage all over the country, from harbours to forests to beaches. On numerous occasions I did fly the iFlight Afterburner myself, and compared to my custom built SpeedyBee Master 5, there were some big differences. The iFlight Afterburner exceeded my 5-inch that I was using for the chase footage in just about every way, shape or form. It was faster, more agile, it had the efficiency with the batteries, it just performed exactly how I wanted it to. I also did notice the efficiency was 10 times better than my SpeedyBee. Like when Ben was flying the Afterburner and I was doing the chasing, I'd be landing at 4, maybe 5 minutes, and he'd be going for 6.5, which is a big difference, especially when it comes to 5-inch flying. The only thing that would really set my 5-inch apart from the iFlight Afterburner would be the fact that the iFlight Afterburner has props in view in the 03, which isn't too big of a deal. You know, I've done a lot of chase footage in my time, and if I had the iFlight Afterburner, it would have made everything so much easier. So if you are thinking about picking one up, I would highly recommend it. But yeah, that's about all from me.
What's up, my name is Tobias, and over the past few weeks I've had the opportunity to fly an unreleased drone called the Afterburner from iFlight. And first thing I noticed when I saw the drone was this thing looks sick. It also has this shell that protects all the main components inside, so if you crash, then they're pretty well protected. So I live in a country called Northern Ireland, and we're known for getting a lot of wind and stormy, rainy conditions no matter the season, which sometimes sucks because when I go to fly my 5-inch, it really struggles. I have to resort to the 7-inch, which isn't as agile or fast. The Afterburner is the first 5-inch I've flown that I've had very minimal problems in the wind. This thing does not get blown around. It just cuts through the wind and it offers a very smooth flying experience. I can strap it on the back of my bag or inside of my bag, it doesn't matter. It's light, it's small, it's been much easier to travel with. The flight times on this thing are insane. All my other 5-inches, 3 to 5 minutes max. First flight on the Afterburner, 7 minutes. And I wasn't even pushing it. There is one disadvantage that I have to make you aware of. Battery mounts on the bottom, which can make it a bit tricky to land. This is a very minor issue, and that's not going to hold you back from flying at all. If you are a cinematic FPV pilot looking to pick up your next 5-inch quad, I highly recommend going to check this drone out. It will definitely not disappoint.
Okay, so the big question that you look for at the end of every review video, should you buy it? In my opinion, if you're in the market for a brand new bind and fly 5-inch FPV drone, or you want to upgrade your existing quad, this is absolutely worth picking up. As I said before, I literally have not flown a higher performing quad before of this size, both in terms of performance, agility, and efficiency, which is something you don't really see very often in a 5-inch. Coupled with all this, you also get the extremely high-end design from the team at 2RAW, combined with the high-end manufacturing from iFlight. I can guarantee you will not be disappointed with this guy. So there you have it, there is my full review of the brand new Afterburner. Let me know what you think of it. Will this be your next 5-inch? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.